our delight to host this sponsors, worker bees, and really just a general friends party at this wonderful facility, the Garden Club. Nancy is here representing the Garden Club, and also Sandy Crucci, and she made this connection for us. Isn't it about the most beautiful place we ever decided to have some kind of a function?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gardens.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's 90 years old, this institution. And so I think my grandmother was one of the founders, Elizabeth Sexton. But anyway, again, thank you all for being here. We have a wonderful program, and this is all to help you acquaint with tomorrow's activities as well. And the first order of business is to introduce our guests from out of town who have come to deliver poetry to us in cowboy fashion. And I'm going to introduce Joel Nelson. Would you stand up, Joel? He's from Alpine, Texas. We have Andy Hedges. I don't see. Oh, there Andy is. You've got to stand up too, Andy. What do you think I'm going to ask you? And Randy Riemann, who is going to do our program tonight. And I'm telling you, these are the most fabulous fellows you'll ever meet. You're going to find out real soon. But what I want to do first, because I know, crowds are always kind of rude to start with, and you got to warm up the stage with the local talent. I'm going to call Will Barker to the podium, and he is. I've known Will Barker. We've worked together. I was 4 years old when I met him.
All your life.
And he's got a wonderful poem. I've got two poets, local poets, cowboy poets, and they're each going to do a poem tonight. And Will, why don't you start off?
I appreciate it. Don't forget to Well, I appreciate being asked to come here because, I'm way out of my league. Y'all understand that. But I'm just an old Florida boy, and I'm going to read you one, which is kind of neat about it, I think. I forget how many, must have been 10 or so years ago, the Garden Club called me, and every year they make an ornament for Christmas, and they sell them for a fundraiser for, I guess, the Cancer Society or the American Heart. And they asked if they could put my poem
It's the Garden Club. Well, let's get this straight.
Didn't I say Garden Club?
Yeah, you did.
Anyhow, I'm going to read you the poem. It's about this disease I have, so I had to write a poem about it. It started the first time I saw one, and got worse when I got up real close. When I got bigger, I raised them from bottle to lead rope to roast. Then later on, I got more because I liked owning them most. I loved driving them, gathering, chasing and catching them too. The smells, the excitement when working, and the satisfaction that it gives you. I love the picture of moving them from one side on to new grass. You know that you're their caretaker, but just don't move them too fast. You know they can be cantankerous, and I know I also can be. It's just a good feeling being out there because you're alive and you're free. Ever since I could, I've had one. It's a disease I can't seem to shake. I hope I can also always have a few cows. It's a habit that's so hard to break.
Thank you, Will. And our other poet is Charlie Semler. And he has been here since the beginning of time. Thank you, Charlie.
been growing ever since you got here.
Yes, I have. And when Sean told me when I come and visit, he had these big time fellows coming from out west. Do some reading. I said, sure, anything I can do to help. I'm from a little town north here, Sebastian. It's all we can do to read and write. But I'm just here to tell you, when he said if y'all weren't satisfied, y'all were going to throw some stuff, and I'm telling you, throw some stuff up here. I'm not like Willie. I'm going to throw it back. So y'all just go ahead and get all you want. This is a little story here about a couple of fellas that I knew that were cantankerous as can be, but they were good folks. And y'all ever seen the stories, the Western stories of the old sheriff and the dime novels and the bad guys and the good guys, and sometimes the bad guys and the good guys made friends? Well, this is a story about those kind of fellas, called the Warden and the Woodsman. And the warden in this case is a fellow who was an old sheriff, had that leathered skin, eyes cut like a hawk, had the boots when he'd walk into a place with a wood floor it would echo. And boys would be in there eating lunch and they whispered to themselves, here comes that badass Sheriff Brayman, here he comes walking in. Well, you're lucky tonight because he's here, and if y'all want to see a sure enough badass American sheriff, we got him right here. Sheriff, throw him away. Throw him away one time. Throw him away now. Hold him in there. There he is. But a fellow by the name of Joe Middleton, we've got a several thousand acre lake out here that was a fish camp, and he wasn't feeling good. And Roy and I went out there to spend a little time with him just to visit and talk about the old days. And what was great about it was I had enough sense of mind to always carry a notebook and a pen with me anymore. That's a credit to Sean Sexton. I had been doing a little bit of writing, and I told him, I said, I had a thought the other day, and I said, I can't remember it. So I had my wife run up there to the paper store and give me a box of pens, and I've got these little notebooks of my truck, and the boat, and the tractor, and the house, and the nightstand, everywhere else. So I just had that feeling, and I took it with me, and we went out there and spent what was going to be just a 45-minute visit. It wound up being about 3 hours. But the great part about it was I knew I was witnessing something that I probably wouldn't see again. But here were some words that I penned down that their words, watching them act like they were 20-year-old boys again. It's called The Warden and the Woodsman. About 50 years ago or so, around Blue Cypress Lake and Land, there lived a young woodsman. Joe Middleton was the man. This land was blessed with plenty fur and feather, fresh meat for the table, where Middletons would gather together. Making a living was real hard, times tough and real lean. But the lake was a gift. Joe turned fishing into green. The wild cypress shore, wandering willows and vines. Joe trapped his catfish, but he was supposed to be using the line. A few years later, about 67 or so, a young man came from Sandcut down around Lake O. A country game warden wore a star out of 10. Roy Raymond met Joe where life friends did begin. Roy dressed in khakis, a wheel gun on his hip. They smiled at each other when hands shook with the grip. These moments in time when journeys begin, the warden and the woodsman became a story therein. Roy was real good slipping down an old game trail. He patiently stalked outlaw poachers he'd nailed. Case after case he made in the woods, but on the Blue Cypress couldn't catch Joe with the goods. He camped it alone for 3 days and 3 nights, laid in the East Cypress trying to catch Joe dead to rights. A close call it came in the zigzag canal. Joe heard a big motor coming. He thought, I'll bet that's my pal. Joe jammed his old boat through a thick willow band. The willows folded back in. It had him hid from the man. Roy eased his scant boat, 90-horse kicker on the back. drove right by old Joe, hid low laying in a skipjack. These men had humor, went ribbing each other. Joe smeared Van Hayden oil on Roy, and Roy stank like a mother. But Roy left in traps, notes in watertight jars. Joe found Roy's notes when running the traps under the stars. As the years passed by, sometimes Roy would ask Joe, "You got wash tubs of catfish? I thought fishing was slow." Joe would just smile with his signature grin. As his hands folded wire, he'd answer, "You like my chicken pen?" Roy left the wardens, became a sheriff for good. Joe kept fishing water, colored from cypress-stained wood. Both men had special gifts to do special things. Joe could get Osprey Susie to show her her wings. But Roy had a knack for the judgment of men, used the weight of the law for the words of a friend. The men come from a time and a place that exist. The freedom they lived, forever gone like lake mist. Both men will hold memories from when they were young, the color of morning woods from the rising sky sun. Gator hunting with Joe as he burned a headlight. Red eyes all over, it looked like Christmas at night. Fishing the lake amongst perch and brim. Tipped a 53-pound catfish, Roy bailed him right in. The thousands of cypress and the pointed up knee. The one that's so perfect, to the north is Joe's tree. The Yankees ask, "How do you get there?" Coming to Blue Cypress to see. Old timers may still say, east of where the fire tower used to be. At Middleton Fish Camp, life's rigors bonded these men. We're all better for knowing them. We'll never see their likes again. Stories from decades, many lost in the past. The warden and the woodsman will now forever last. Listen, if you want to take your picture with the dusty man with the 10 star, $5 after it's over. That'll help with the fun. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Charlie. I'd like to ask the Lower Riding Jackson Board members all to stand. Would you all do that? Joanne, would you stand? We have the most fabulous board, and we have one hard and fast rule, and that is we're not going to do it if it's not going to be fun. It's my pleasure to introduce Randy Raymond. I have the first show I did in Elko was with Randy and two wonderful women, all great poets. And I've seen this presentation that we're going to watch tonight 4 times in Elko. It's become a regular feature of the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering. And I invited him to come and do a program, do the poetry program on Sunday. And we always try to do a wonderful Saturday program as well. And I asked him if he would give that same program at Elko on a Saturday night for us. So you're all in for a treat. I'm saving you all a 3,000-mile trip. So I'm going to give you Randy. He's from Montana.
I'll make sure everybody can hear this in the back. Okay, I'm an adopted son of Montana, and it's real fun to enter a new community and watch people who've known each other a long time and see how vicious you are to one another. They talked about the gators down here, but you guys are like swimming with sharks. I can see that. So it's really great for Joel and I and Andy to be here, and I won't speak for them. That's not something we normally do, but I can speak for them right now to say we've had such a great time already, and for Sean and Sharon to host us and to make us feel at home and introduce us to their friends, that's a real compliment to us. I'm the only one here probably from north of the Mason-Dixon line, so I got to watch out. But I'm a great fan of the artist Charlie Russell. Charlie Russell was from St. Louis, Missouri, and he was born in 1864. And as a boy, he was fascinated with the frontier because he lived at the jumping off point for the West. St. Louis was the gateway to the West. And when Charlie went to Montana after 16 years, he was 16 years old, and he ran away from home, he ran away from school. He was born to a fairly affluent family, and they were well educated and really loved books. And Charlie's uncle was William Bent, who had Bent's Fort on the Arkansas River, partner to Kit Carson. So he'd grown up his whole life hearing these tales of the West. And after he'd run away and been recovered a multitude of times, his father finally acquiesced and allowed him to go to Montana. And when he arrived there, he was 16 years old. I want you to hear me. There we go. So Charlie arrived in Montana in 1880. And that was 4 years after Custer's last stand, and it was 10 years prior to the massacre on Wounded Knee in South Dakota. So it was a time period when the West was really changing. And this was Charlie on his first cowboy job in the 1880s. That's a horse he called Monty. And as I said, Charlie was really enamored of the West. His father finally acquiesced and sent him out west, and he sent him to a sheep ranch where Charlie lasted 1 week. He got fired because he kept losing the sheep. So he ran away, and when he did, he ran into a man who was most fortunate for Charlie. The man's name was Jake Hoover. And Jake Hoover was a legendary trapper in Montana, a mountain man and a plainsman. And Charlie spent 2 years with Jake Hoover living in this cabin. This is a representation of that time, one of Charlie's paintings. And he really got a solid education in living in the wilds of Montana. And after 2 years with Jake Hoover, Charlie decided he was ready for a cowboy crew, and so he left. And he spent the next decade working the cattle ranges of Montana. This is a picture of Charlie, a self-portrait actually, called Charlie and Friends. And first Charlie worked as a night and as a horse wrangler. And as a cowboy. This is a very famous painting of Charlie. It's called Men of the Open Range. And from his arrival in 1880 until his death in 1926, Charlie witnessed these great changes in the West. When he arrived there right at the tail end of the pre-reservation, free-roaming Indians on the plains. He saw the great herd of buffalo. This painting is called When the Land Belonged to God. And he saw herds of elk and deer that roamed. Joel. And immersed himself in the glory days of the open range cattle industry. And these were some of the paintings from Charlie's portfolio. After 11 years on the range in Montana, Charlie decided to go for his art full time. And this was Charlie in 1893 when he decided to make art his career. And from 1893 until 1926, Charlie has 4,000 known works. Oils, watercolors, sculptures, little wood gnomes, bronzes, 46 different bronzes, and about 400 illustrated letters, some of which I'm going to read to you tonight. Before Charlie left the range in 1886 and 87, he was working for the OH Ranch, which is in the Judith Basin. And this little sketch is what really started Charlie's career as a household name. In 1886 and 87 was the worst winter in history in the West. It was a perfect storm. Cattle ranges were overstocked and the markets were low, so ranchers held their cattle back in the West because they all went east. And that summer, with overstocked ranges and poor rainfall, the grass was bad. And then winter came, and it was legendary in its fierceness. There were month-long periods of minus 40 degrees. There was 3 feet of ice and snow on the prairies. And normally in our country, we have a thing called the Chinook wind. And when that Chinook blows, it warms up the grass, it warms up the prairie, and it clears the snow. And it didn't happen that year. So tens of thousands of cattle starved and died in the winter of 86 and 87. It is what ended, it's the event that ended the open range of the West. Some ranches lost between 60 and 70% of their cattle. And when the cow boss on this ranch was sent a letter asking as to the condition of his cattle, he was struggling to write a response, and Charlie handed him this little painting he'd done. Called Waiting for a Chinook. That's what we call those warm winds. And the guy crumpled up his answer and he mailed this picture to his boss in Helena. And the picture was copied in the newspaper. It was spread out all over the U.S. and it was the first time anybody outside of Montana really heard the name Charlie Russell. So that's the little sketch that started his career. And here's one of his early letters, still while he was working on the range. It's to a friend of his named Pony Bill Davis, and it says this: Friend Pony, I received your letter and was glad to hear from you. I am still in Montana and still working on the range. We are at present busy gathering horses for the spring roundup. Cattle have all been driven north to Milk River, and I leave there in a few days. It's a pretty good cow. The fellow that told you I was sketching for a magazine, and you can change now, Joel, please. The fellow that told you I was sketching for a magazine was mistaken, as I have tried several times to make a living painting, but I could not make it stick, and I had to go back to the range. I expect I will have to ride till the end of my days, but I would rather be a poor cowpuncher than a poor artist. Well, old boy, there's nothing to write about, and as you know, I'm a very poor writer, so I will close hoping to hear from you soon. I remain your friend, C.M. Russell. And here's another letter to a fellow named Charlie Joyce. Charlie Joyce was a guy that night herded with Charlie Russell in 1886 on the Bear Paw Roundup in our country. That's a real famous place. And Charlie Joyce was also from a wealthy family, he was an educated guy. He and Charlie really hit it off. The Joyce family were from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they traded in naval wares and canvas, and they made tents, and they made hemp rope. And this was a letter to his friend Charlie. Again, this one is dated about 1891, and it says, I received your letter again and was glad to hear from you. I left the Judith country like all cowpunchers. I followed the herds of cattle as all the big herds have moved out across the Missouri River. I am now in the Milk River country, and it's a good one. And as the greater part of it is badlands and can't be settled, I'm thinking it will last. I have roamed around a good bit since I saw you. I went up north across the Medicine Line, and I lived 6 months with the Blackfeet Indians. I still have my same horses, Monty and Eagle. Monty looks the same as ever. I still night herd, and often in the long nights last fall I thought of you. I suppose you want to hear about the boys. Well, Ed is dead. He died about a year ago. I've lost 2 brothers since I saw you, and though it's hard, we all have to stand such things in life. Jim Sheldon has gone, and all the cowpunchers are in this country. I was surprised to hear that you were married, but I think it was the best thing you ever did, and I hope now you will settle down and live like a white man. I never expect to be that lucky. I expect if I ever get married, it will be to this kind, as there are a great many up here, and I seem to take well among them. I had the chance to marry young Louse's daughter. He's a Blackfoot chief. It was the only chance I've ever had to marry into a good family. I did not like the way my intended cooked dog, so we broke off our engagement. Well, old boy, I cannot think of anything to write about. I go out on the roundup on the 20th, but my address will be Chinook, Choteau County, hoping that you will remain my friend, your friend as ever, Charlie Russell. And I have to tell you, there's an inside joke here. The Blackfeet was one of the tribes that never cooked dog. And so if you didn't know that, you might not catch the joke. And this little sketch and the little lines that went with it was sent to Milt Henderson. Milt Henderson was the owner of the Milwaukee Beer Hall in Great Falls, Montana, which was a saloon, a gambling emporium, and an adult recreation center. Charlie and several other cowboys, a roundup cook and an ex-prize fighter, spent that winter in a tar paper shack on the wrong side of town in Great Falls. And every once in a while Charlie would sell a painting, and so he'd grubstake the whole gang. He usually sold that painting to one of the tavern owners, and there were quite a few of them in Great Falls. And the letter says this: enclosed you will find $10 I owe you, much obliged. With regards to yourself and all the boys and girls, I remain your friend, C.M. Russell. Now here's a letter that Charlie wrote to a guy named Charles Shazline, and Shazline was Charlie's first art broker, and Shazline owned a paint company in Butte, Montana. And today Butte, Montana is about 32,000 people, but in the 1890s it was 125,000 people. Wow. It's called the richest hill on earth, and more money in gold, silver, lead, copper, and cambium came out of Butte, Montana than the whole rest of the world put together. So it was rife with miners, and it was also a power center of the state. The Anaconda Copper Company was owned by William A. Clark, who was the richest man always in the Americas. He made the Gettys look poor. And so Butte was a big hub, and there was a lot of money there. And so Charlie would send his artwork from the little town of Cascade over to Butte, and Charles Shazline would try to sell. This letter simply says, I received your letter and am glad the pictures pleased you. The price is $40 each. Yours truly, C.M. Russell. So he sketched that sketch to write those 3 lines. And then he mailed them in this envelope. And when Charlie was just getting started with his art career, he had quite a bit more time then than later because he became so popular. And so he would often send these elaborate illustrated envelopes. And you can see the cowboy up there in the tree, his hat and his Winchester down here on the ground, and Mama Bear's looking at him. And so bears were one of the animals that Charlie Russell loved, and he used them often in his paintings. And here's another envelope. This tar paper shack that the boys lived in, they had a nickname in the newspaper, and it was called the Hungry Seven. And they were notorious for stealing chickens. And so here's Charlie sending a letter to a buddy of his. Now, if you notice in the lead, there's a fellow with a red sash around his waist. That's called a Métis sash, or a half-breed sash. And that was Charlie's, no matter what he was wearing, if it was a tuxedo at a formal dinner, Charlie wore his Métis sash. So whenever you see Charlie, he's always got that on, both in his paintings and in photographs. And Kid Price, a good buddy of his, was obviously one of the co-conspirators on this particular foul expedition. And Charlie sent this, and here was the letter that accompanied it. Friend Kid, enclosed fine $1. With regards to the bunch, your friend C.M. Russell. Now, the interesting part about this, and everybody concurs, that writing was terribly difficult for Charlie. And Jody Young, who was a protege of his, said he would sit at a table to construct a sentence, and the water would drip off his nose but he could paint that painting in 10 minutes. Just was simple for him. And they say that he was a much better sculptor than a painter. Here's another illustrated envelope. Take this to the butte of many smokes. And that fellow that's portrayed there, the Indian fellow with Charlie, was a young Chippewa Indian named Young Boy. And he and Charlie were great pals, and Charlie used him often as a model. If he needed somebody that he wanted, he would have Young Boy stand in various positions so that he could get the proportions right of movement that he was depicting in his paintings. And here's another envelope to Young Boy. And you notice the buffalo skull in the corner there. That was Charlie's iconic symbol, that buffalo skull. Charlie had a lot to say about the buffalo. When the buffalo nickel was minted, they asked Charlie what he thought, because they thought it was honoring the native tribes, and he said it's damn small money for so much meat. This is a letter to Bob Thurman from 1899, and he was a real Montana pioneer in Charlie's mind because he arrived there about 40 years before Charlie did. And the letter just says this: "Friend Bob, we received the chickens, and thank you very much. We haven't done a thing with 2 of them, and we hope to do as well with the other pair. When you come to town, don't forget our latch string is on the outside. Your friend, C.M. Russell." This is Charlie Russell and Nancy Cooper, who Charlie married, and this is their wedding picture. They were married in 1896 in Cascade, Montana. And they were married in the home of a guy named Ben Roberts, who was a saddle maker there. Charlie had $15 to his name, 10 of which he gave the preacher. And they moved into a 12 by 24 foot shack, kind of a cracker house, if you will, with a lean-to kitchen off the back side and a dog trot between. Charlie was 32 years old and Nancy was 18. This is the stagecoach that ran from Great Falls through Ulm and down to Cascade and then Wolf Creek and then over to Helena. And this is on one of Charlie's early Christmas greetings. And I'm going to read you a little something from Nancy, who this is the only letter I read here that isn't Charlie's, but I really loved what she had to say. And Nancy wrote this about their first Christmas together in 1896. She said, "Our first Christmas started with that spirit of mystery and secrecy, and we kept it throughout our lives. We had no money to spend, and no place to spend it if there'd been any. Just a little general mercantile store in Cascade where one could buy overalls or bacon. None of the fluffy Christmas things one sees nowadays. We both needed lots of things, and among those we wanted most were warm slippers, as this shack home of ours was not very warm except in the summer. So I bought for Charlie a pair of felt slippers, and I made a slipper bag out of black broadcloth, and I worked his initials in it with red silk on one side, mine on the other. Put the slippers in the case and hung it by his sock, which he had hung up for Santa Claus. My stocking was in another place to give Santa plenty of room. At 4 in the morning, there was no more sleep for us. It was our first Christmas morning. I stepped out, got my stockings, and crawled back into bed. I found some nuts and an orange, and the same little old hard bright-colored candies that we'd always had as children. And away down in the toe of my stocking, I found a $5 bill. One package revealed to me a pair of felt slippers, the exact mates, only smaller, to the ones I had given my husband. We were happy over that Christmas, with nothing more than I've described, because the happiness came from within. Charlie was as pleased as if he'd gotten $1 million. The simple things in life always did thrill him, and no one could live near him without taking on some of that childlike joy from the little things. This was a Christmas painting called Christmas in the Line Camp. And Charlie loved Christmas time, and he did a lot of cool stuff for Christmas. And this comes with a great long poem that I'll spare you from right now, but I'll tell you another time, maybe even tomorrow. But he often wrote a short poem for Christmas. And here's one of those. I've known of men that having snakes and other swarms of bats. Some had spiders in their clothes and turkeys with plug hats. Old whiskey was the blame for this, for drinking was the cause. I guess I'll have to quit the booze 'cause I got Santa Claus. And here's the fella who's not yet quit the booze, who's got Santa Claus. That was the painting that came with that little verse. And this is a really long letter, especially early in Charlie's letter writing career, because it was so difficult for him to write. And it was sent to a man named George Kerr, along with a painting that he had sent through his father in St. Louis, Missouri. George Kerr was an ex-Confederate soldier. And Charlie sent him a painting called Dangerous Ground. And here's this letter. The letter came along with the painting to describe to Mr. Kerr what the painting was really about. It says, "Dear Mr. Kerr, I sent some pictures to my father, one among them called Dangerous Ground, representing a Kootenai hunting party in the old buffalo days. The Kootenai, who are a mountain tribe, often invaded their enemy's country for buffalo. The Blackfeet, who live on the plains, are a very strong and warlike people who, as the Indians would say, had broken the pipe with the mountain people, and the grass had grown long in the trail between their fires. So when the Kootenai hunted in Blackfeet country, he did so cautiously, dismounting and walking their ponies, whether in high or open ground. On these occasions they went in small parties, generally using dark ponies. If the horses were white, the owner threw his robe over him, and they traveled very slowly, allowing their animals to graze now and then, imitating as near as possible the movements of a wild herd of old buffalo bulls. All glittering ornaments were hidden. Even the lance was carried point down for fear its flash in the sun might betray them. In the old times, when buffalo were plenty, old bulls were not hunted, as neither their meat nor their hide was good. But as soon as a bull loses his fighting qualities, he gets whipped out of the herd by the younger set, and as misery loves company, these old fellows gather in small bunches. Now the Indian is a great student of nature. He knows her well, and it takes a thief to catch a thief, and it takes an Indian to fool an Indian. He knows that some far-off butte holds a sentinel who is as motionless as the rocks about him, but whose eyes see all. Not a rock on the plains escapes his keen sight. He will read the puff of a signal smoke miles away, the way his white cousin would read a book. If a distant herd is suddenly disturbed while grazing, he studies out the cause. If the wild goose circles his feeding grounds and fails to light, it surely is man that has caused it. Nature is his mother, and she talks with her child. Now the horse is much quicker in his movements than other animals his size, but put a man at his side who knows his business, and he will sure keep you guessing. Well, Mr. Kerr, as I am a very poor writer, I will close. If you ever come to this country and cut my trail, do not pass my camp. My lodge is yours, and the pipe will be lit for you. C.M. Russell. Charlie was really well known in Montana and the West, right around Montana, but until this year, 1903, when he went to the World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri, that was the first time he was exposed to Midwest and Eastern audiences. And so this letter comes from that time period in that trip, 1903. And it was written to a friend of his named Albert Trigg. Albert Trigg owned the Brunswick Bar in Great Falls. And he became one of Charlie's best friends through the years. They lived neighbors together in their part of town. Says friend Trigg, I thought I would write and let you know that I'm still among the live ones. I have taken in the World's Fair, and it is very grand, but don't interest me much. The Animal Gardens, which is near there, is much more to my liking, for they have a very good collection, among them a coyote who licked my hand like he knew me. I guess I brought the smell of the plains with me. I sure felt sorry for the poor devil. A life sentence for nothing on earth but looks and general principles. But you can't do nothing for a fella whose whole family is outlaws back as far as anybody can remember, even if he is a neighbor of yours. If you could make hair bridles, it would be a lot easier. But with nothing to do but think of home, it's just hell. Now I want to stop here. At the territorial prison in Montana, they were famous for making hitched hair bridles. And if you have one of those in a collection, you have an absolute fortune and a retirement account. That's what he's referring to when he makes that statement about the hair bridles. I am staying with my folks who live very near the place where I was raised. The country's much built up there, but there's enough old landmarks left and little patches of woods enough to take me back to my boyhood days. I was much surprised the other morning to scare up about 10 quail, but as there is no shooting allowed, that accounts for it. Although seeing these birds in the woods reminds me of when I was a youngster of about 9 winters hunting with a party of kids. We had one gun. This weapon was the old-time muzzle-loading musket, and there was but one boy in the party long enough to load her without the aid of a stump or a log. So, of course, he packed the ammunition, and he done most of the loading. We were shooting in turns at anything that moved. Well, I kept belly aching, saying, my turn, and the big kid said, you'll get your turn, and I did. When he loads for me, I remember how the rod jumped clear of the barrel. He must have spent 5 minutes tamping the load, then handing the gun to me, he says, there, that would kill a tiger. And I believe it would have if he'd have been on the same end as I was. Our game was crows. I climbed to the top of a rail fence to get clean range, and then, as the books say, for an instant my hawk eye measured the glistening barrel. Then the death-like stillness was broken by the crack of my faithful weapon. I kept it broken with howls for quite a while. Well, Trig, I'm all in, and I was like, I guess I have nothing more to say. I will close the deal. Best wishes to yourself and family. Your friend, C.M. Russell. Here's another quick letter from St. Louis. I am still here in the smoke of the tall teepees. You can see that red sash running in front of a streetcar down there. About the only excitement I get is dodging cars and automobiles, but that's plenty. Of course, the law enforces them to ring a bell after passing over a human. I think that is to call the wagon which hauls you to the morgue. I was at the World's Fairgrounds the other day and took 25 cents worth of automobile ride. We hadn't gone far till I'd have given more than that to walk. Between holding on and staying under my hat, I was busy. I thought it was running away. We were sure going some. It reminds me of some rides I had with you behind that lady's horse you used to own. You remember the one you sold in Butte? He was so kind. I have often wondered if the man that bought him is still living. Well, Bill, I will close for now. You will notice in the picture I spent money on new harness. I'm going to dress well if it breaks me. Merry Christmas to you and yours, your friend C.M. Russell. Everywhere Charlie went, he would observe the latest fashions in that place, and he'd paint himself in those fashions. He was notorious for never wearing anything but his cowboy clothes his whole career until the day he died. And so for a gag for his friends, he would paint himself up in the latest gear. And 1905, this was January, as you can see, and Charlie had gone on to from St. Louis to New York, and this was a pivotal place in Charlie's career. 1903 and 1904 changed Charlie's artwork, and it changed largely because of the artists he met in New York, and one in particular, a young man named Philip Goodwin, who was the premier sporting artist in all of the Americas. And he used lots of color, and Charlie got real brave about color after he met those guys. It's something he had always wanted to do, but he was self-taught. And he painted in the colors that were familiar to him, and he did it pretty conservatively. But there's a big market change in his artwork from this point on. Here's the letter. Friend Trigg, as I am lonesome tonight and far from my range, I thought it might help to write to you. I am in a camp of 4 million, and I guess I know about 8. It makes me feel small. The whites are sure plentiful here. Now remember where Charlie lived. He lived in Montana. Nancy and I took in the Chinese theater, and at that time there were far fewer whites than there were red. So, just so you know. Nancy and I took in the Chinese theater the other night. I guess it was good. The Chinese seemed to think so. But for me it was a little better than Grand Opera.
The way those Mongolians were painted up would make our Indian grind his teeth with envy. They sure are a scary looking bunch. Barring this and a few other shows, I haven't really seen much since I was here. At the fairgrounds, the most interesting thing to me, and again this was the World's Fair, were the people of the Philippines. These people are very primitive, forging their own weapons and weaving their own cloth. But you will notice from the sketch that the latter industry does not take up much of their time, as there wasn't enough cloth in the whole camp to upholster a crutch. They are very small but well-built people, and judging from the way they handle their spears, if they ever learn to handle a Winchester, Uncle Sam is liable to have a lot of trouble with them. They are certainly a snaky-looking article, and they say they ain't satisfied with no puny souvenir like a scalp. They take the whole top from the Adam's apple up. With regards to the bunch, your friend C.M. Russell. And here's a little poem on a piece of birch bark. When Charlie got fairly prosperous, which he did about this time, he and Nancy bought a little spot of ground where Glacier Park is today. It was one of the last places of really wild country in Montana, right on the shores of Lake McDonald, and they would spend their summers there. And Charlie would paint from there, and people would come and visit him, and he called his lodge Bull's Head Lodge. And this came from that time period, 1906. And this little poem says, you can see here, and you might be able to read it even, there's a couple there against the lake, friends of theirs who were on their honeymoon, and you see a variety of birds up here, and the poem says the hawk with a stare, how many are there? In the glare of the sun, I can't see but one, said the owl. It's a figureless sum, 'tis two made one, says the fisher. Add it and try, 'cause figures don't lie, you'll find it quite true, twice one makes two, says the fisher. You'll have to show me, I've seen two make three, says the stork. It's two, says the loon, and a strong case of spoon. So that was their first anniversary gift from Charlie. Here's another picture of Lake McDonald and the Rocky Mountain front. The spine of the world is what the Blackfeet called it. Charlie loved to row. That's how he got his exercise at Lake McDonald. He took pack trips and he did horseback rides and things too, but he loved to row on the lake. And this is just a little shot of Charlie on that lake. And here's a little self-portrait in wax. Charlie was a magician with a little ball of wax, and he would oftentimes, in conversation telling stories, put his hat over his hands and fashion something with his hands while he was talking. And when he was finished, he would put his hat back on and hand that item to the people he was talking to, especially if they were kids. He loved kids. And he would fashion a pig or a bear or something like that. There's one of the bears he fashioned. Joel, we're going to skip. There we go. Thank you, just right. In 1907, Charlie went to Mexico, old Mexico, and he sent this letter back. Charlie, you have to remember, felt like he got to Montana too late. Even though he participated for over a decade in the glory days of the range cowboy, he was always wanting to be somewhere earlier than he got there because he loved it wild and free. And so he and Nancy and his father went down to old Mexico, and here's the letter that came back. I've been down to Mexico since I saw you, Bob, and I am sending you some sketches of cow people down there. It's sure an old-time cow country. I've traveled from the northern line to within 100 miles of the isthmus and never saw a wire. It's all open range. Now, I used to think the old-time cowpuncher was pretty fancy in this country, but for pretty, these Mexicans make us look like hay diggers. I was on the range of Don Luis Terreses, the biggest cowman in the world. It takes 1,000 riders to cover his country. He only branded 75,000 calves last spring. Besides his cows, he owns thousands of horses and mules. The sketch above shows what a Mexican cowpuncher looks like. He don't run a wagon, as they say in this country, as in Mexico they don't use them. His grub and his bedding is packed on mules, and the mules ain't overloaded. The bill of fare is beef, beans, cornmeal, coffee, and red peppers. The biggest part, red peppers. That is, I think, from some of the feed I got. Every man wears his own bed like the gentleman in this sketch, so there's no need for a bed wagon. This sketch shows the vaquero. He gets $8 to $10 a month and his grub. But as mezcal is his whiskey, at 1 cent a drink, he manages to have a good time. One drink of this booze will make a jackrabbit spit in a rattlesnake's eye. And as all these vaqueros pack knives, cow outfits often leave town short-handed. God knows the booze we got was bad enough, but I believe if we'd had mezcal at the Mexican price with our wages, every cow outfit would have needed a hearse instead of a bed wagon. As it was bad enough, and we both know many a cowpuncher that fell under the smoke of a 45 and is taking his long sleep in a hole in the prairie. Best regards from us to you, your friend C.M. Russell. And this letter is kind of intriguing to me. Charlie was an expert on the Indian culture, not just because he lived with the Blackfeets, but he was a real observer and comparer and student of the West, and he had a lot of informal education, most of it self-education. This letter was sent to a man in Texas named Charles Reimershofer, who had sent Charlie a question. Charles Reimershofer had owned a painting by a man named Carl Weimers, who was a very early painter in the United States. And he made 2 journeys up the Missouri River into Indian country, and he made paintings, but he died at a very young age. 32 years old he died in 1862, 2 years before Charlie was born. But he was a St. Louis artist, and his work was still there in St. Louis, and Charlie grew up seeing his work and really respected it. And this man happened to write Charlie this letter about a Carl Weimers painting that he had. And he says, you know what, we could lift these curtains now. It's a little warm in here and let a little air come through. If anybody would volunteer to do that, I'll just keep going. I was just trying to get rid of the light earlier. It says, Dear Sir, I received your letter and also the photo of the buffalo hunt by Carl Weimers. I have always liked Carl's work, and I think he knew the Indians well. And as to what Indians they are, I cannot say for sure, but they are not Blackfeet. You will notice, go ahead. You will notice that the hair is shaved close, leaving only a roach and a scalp lock. The only tribe of the plains who wore their hair this way were the Pawnees, and that is what I would call them. Blackfeet, like all tribes, had many different ways of dressing their hair. That painting, by the way, was called Indian Beauty. Sometimes wearing a roach, but the sides and the back hair was left long. And as to horses, there was no color known to horseflesh that wasn't used by the Indians, and as all tribes I know are fond of painting their ponies, white is a favorite color, giving them a good background. Yours truly, C.M. Russell. I want you to notice a couple things about this painting. This is a buffalo hunt. Charlie painted 4 buffalo hunts, and he numbered them 1 through 4. And if you take a look at where that man's toes are, you see how he's got them behind the elbow of that horse? That horse has got no hand on the reins. He's exactly where he needs to be, and it was imperative. The Indian's buffalo horse was his most prized possession. A lot of time and effort went into training them to run up to the spot where a man could get a lance or an arrow in behind the last rib of a buffalo and up into the vitals. It was impossible for these bows to pierce the rib cage of a bison, and they didn't even try because they knew that. And so whenever you see a depiction of a buffalo hunt and you see a guy with his arrow pointed at the rib cage, you know the painter doesn't know what he's talking about. Anyway, this is classic Charlie Russell. Accuracy was really important to him. He really tried hard to get it right. And this is a little vignette, and I'm putting this in here because Charlie drank pretty hard, like a lot of the cowboys did when he was young, and in 1908 he quit drinking, and he never touched another drop for the rest of his life. And when his old cronies would ask him, he'd say, "I can't mix alcohol and paint." But here's the story of this. It's time for good resolutions. I better start out. On the right it says Poker Jake's Palace. And you can see all the tracks leading to Poker Jake's Palace and the empty bottle. And on the left it says Temperance Meeting. And there's one set of tracks. And this is the poem. It's time for good resolutions is what the pious folks say. But if tracks don't lie, it's plain to the eye, there ain't been but one made today. And here's a letter to this client of Charlie's, Mr. Kilmer. And it concerns this painting called The Medicine Man. And he also painted 5 paintings called The Medicine Man, and he numbered them 1 through 5. This is number 2. Mr. Kilmer, this was 1911. The Medicine Man I consider one of the best pieces of my work, and these few words may give you some idea of the meaning of the picture. The Medicine Man among the Plains Indians often had more to do with the movements of his people than the chief. He is supposed to have had the power to speak with the spirits and the animals. This painting represents a band of Blackfeet Indians with their medicine man in the foreground. The landscape was taken from a sketch I made on Lone Tree Creek in the Judith Basin, and I remember when this was a game country. The mountain range is the high woods, and Haystack and Steamboat Buttes are to the right. And that's Haystack and Steamboat Buttes. And the high woods are in my country. We'll advance once more. The Blackfeet once claimed all country from the Saskatchewan south to the Yellowstone, and one of their favorite hunting grounds was the Judith Basin. This country today is fenced and settled by ranchmen and farmers with nothing but a few deep worn trails where once walked the buffalo. I am glad, Mr. Kilmer, that I saw this before nature's enemy, the white man, invaded and marred its beauty. Sincerely, C.M. Russell. It won't take you long to figure out that Charlie was very sympathetic to the natives' plights, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. He had a great deal of respect for them and for the wild country they lived in. There's a really nice story that goes along with this painting. Charlie was at the Calgary Stampede in 1911. By then he had a really wide reputation, and there was a British gentleman who was a lord who came to buy one of Charlie's paintings, this painting. And Charlie was nowhere to be found, and he insisted on meeting the artist before he would buy the painting. And Nancy was the business end of Charlie's life. Charlie didn't price things, Charlie didn't sell things, Charlie painted things. Nancy took care of the rest of it. And so there was a young man named Charles Frolicker who was helping Charlie and Nancy sent him to fetch Charlie to meet this lord from England so that the guy would buy this painting. And when John Frolicker found Charlie, he was nestled down on the ground, squatted down, talking sign with an old blood Indian. A blood Indian was the same as the Blackfoot Indian. In Canada they called them bloods, in America they called them Blackfeet. And John interrupted Charlie, and he said, Charlie, there's a lord from England. He's here to buy a painting, and he won't buy the painting unless he comes to meet you, gets to meet you, and Nancy sent me to fetch you. And so Charlie's answer was this: you tell His Highness, the Lord, whole proof of socks down on the ankle, that it's no further from there to here than it is from here to there. And he stayed put. And Nancy cried for 2 days. Okay. And here's a little picture of Charlie painting a picture. And this picture has got quite a story. It's in the state capitol in Helena, Montana. It's 25 feet wide and it's 12 feet high. Charlie had a log cabin studio that he painted everything in, and he had to actually raise the roof of his studio to get the canvas in so he could paint this painting. And this was a commission from the state of Montana. He was commissioned. There were about 4 choices of people to paint a painting for the rotunda in the state capitol. And so they fooled around, keeping all these painters guessing who was going to paint the painting. And finally somebody asked Charlie, and he said, if you want angels and cupids, hire the guy from New York. If you want a Western painting, hire me. So they hired him. Every other painting in the state capitol is the Anglo conquering of the West, but not Charlie's. So here's the story that went with this. We'll get to the painting in a minute. Friend Goodwin, I received your letter and was glad to hear from you. I got that job, and as the picture is only 25 feet long and 12 feet wide, it's got me thinking. The subject is to be Lewis and Clark meeting the Flatheads. Now this is quite a jump for me, and I'm liable to have to call for help. Get all my New York friends to come in here and make hay. And the hay he's referring to is the background of this painting. Here's Charlie during the process of the painting, so you can get a scope size. I do not think I will be back to New York this winter, as I'm going to be pretty busy with regards to yourself and your folks. Same to all my artist friends, your friend C.M. Russell. And here's the painting itself. This is called Lewis and Clark meeting the Flatheads at Ross's Hole. And this is Lewis and Clark. So the most famous expedition in America, 2 years all across the country and back, and only lost one man to appendicitis. And Charlie thought that the native culture was much more important than the fellas that were looking for directions. Okay. Right after that, the commission by the state of Montana, Charlie took a vacation and he came to Stuart, Florida. And I might tell you this, that commission that Charlie got paid $5,000. And he started that painting the 15th of May, and he hung it in the state capitol the 1st of July. Wow. This letter says this: Friend Trigg, we are now in the land of flowers, where things grow without the help of man. When I look at its many waterways, it is easy to understand why this was a favorite hangout for all seagoing holdups in the old days. On these shores, many a ship changed her captain, and he who lost command left his bones on the sands of Florida's shores. I will tell you all about it soon, with best wishes to you and the bunch, your friend C.M. Russell. When Charlie was about 7 years old, he told his dad he was going to be a pirate, and he tattooed an anchor on his arm. Another letter of Charlie's from Stuart, Florida. It says, Friend Bill, I'm here, and all of these things that I'm seeing are on the square. There was a time when these sights would have worried me, but not now. Our old friend Bill Bullard saw all these and more, and I don't think he was ever any further south than Bannock. This proves that you don't have to travel to see the wonders of the world. This is sure the home of all crawling, swimming, and flying things. It's wonderful, but I wouldn't advise any booze fighters to come, as it might bother him to know he's been right all these years. With regards to yourself and the bunch, your friend C.M. Russell. And here's another from Florida. Dear friend, I'm some hazy on history, but I remember reading of an old gentleman from Spain who got a hunch there was a spring of youth somewhere across the big water. The minute his feet hit the sand, he goes to looking for springs. Now, the woods is lousy with engines, but the old gent wears a suit made by the village blacksmith, so he ain't taking no chances of getting harpooned. But, like all humans, he's hoggish. He ain't satisfied with drinking out of the spring, so he strips and goes swimming, thinking he'll soak up more of the youthful fluid that way. Right there is where he fell down. Some of our red brothers slip up and catch him with his shell off. Getting between him and his iron union suit, they start shooting for drinks, and the old man is awfully unlucky. He gets stuck every time. When his friends find him, he resembles a porcupine, and the red men have gathered souvenirs. Steel armor, and every bit of hair on his head, not leaving enough to send to the girl he left behind. And here's one more letter from Florida. This gentleman is no kin to Sandy Irwin or Bill Young, though from his regalia you'd guess it. But it's a safe bet that he don't know Bobby Burns and he never heard the bagpipes. This is a Seminole Indian and lives in the parts of Florida that the whites ain't using, and there's quite a bunch of that. The whites are always kind to these people and they let them have all the land that's underwater. He could live better if his feet were wet. Although he dresses like a Scotsman, they say he's easier to civilize. With best wishes, your friend C.M. Russell. Joel, we're going to advance a little bit further, I think. Well, no, just stay right there. Dear friend Harry, I'm a long time thanking you for the headdress you sent, but I never was fast and old dead time ain't changed my gait. The headdress is a good one. It is certainly a wild man's crest. I think our red brother stole his fashions from animals and birds he knew. He saw the sage-cock dance and spread his tail feathers. That's where Mr. Injun got his dance bustle. He liked the war bonnet that the Canadian Jay and the Kingfisher wore, so he made one for himself. But the only real American don't use much style anymore. Uncle Sam lets him play Injun once a year, and he dances under the flag that made a farmer out of him. Once nature gave him everything he wanted, and now the agent gives him bibbed overalls, hooks his hands around a plow, and tells him to push it along, that it's a good thing. Well, maybe it is, but they're having a hell of a time proving it to a people who, since the time began, never done anything harder than pull a bowstring or push a skinning knife. Nature was not always kind to these people, but she sure never lied to them. The red men are almost gone now, Harry. But if few clothes and fancy ones mean savages, we got lots of she ones around here, most of them setting traps for men. Thanks again for the headdress. Good medicine to you and yours. Your friend, C.M. Russell. In 1914, Charlie went to London to have a one-man showing at the Doors Gallery. And this was quite an accomplishment for the guy. And here's a few letters that he sent. I'm going to have to quit here, guys, because we're running out of time. But here's the first letter. It says, well, I got across all right, alive, but that's about all. Anytime they tell you that these big boats run smooth, send them to me. The wave wagon I rode wasn't quite as big as the smelter. It was more like the size of the Rainbow Hotel. I wish Bill Ward had been running this boat, and I would have put in quite a complaint. The Atlantic has no respect for size. This boat done the tangos, the hesitation waltz, and all the latest snaky dances all the way across. And I don't dance. I was busy in other ways. I was told I would be all right when I got my sea legs, but I did not find them till the day I landed, and I've been busy ever since looking for my land ones. Now they say seasickness is good for you because it cleans you out, and that's no lie. I'll bet a vacuum cleaner couldn't raise a thing from me. Well, Smitty, I haven't seen much yet, so I'll send more word later. With regards to you and the bunch, your friend C.M. Russell. I stood in this very spot. I wasn't wearing a Métis sash, and I didn't tip my hat to the Queen's Guard, but I was there in 1995. I did a tour of cowboy poetry in England and Wales, and I can remember how impressed I was with the Queen's Guard. They were incredible, and their horses were too. Charlie this to a friend of his. I went up to the palace the other day where King George camps, and everything was so quiet that I think George overslept that morning. Maybe he was up late in a stud poker game. Anyhow, I didn't disturb him, but took my hat off to the guard, and I let it go at that. It's a cinch, George will be some sore when he finds I passed without calling. Now these guards are about as fancy a bunch of bulls as I ever saw, all 6-footers rigged in gold and polished steel. Each rider stands at his post like a statue, and if it hadn't been for the twitch of the horse's ears, I'd have bet it was taxidermy work. Well, Sid, I sure am lonesome, and I wish right now I had my elbow on your bar with a couple of swallows of malt before me. I sure would loosen the old bunch up with some talk then. If I stay in this camp much longer, I'm going to start talking to myself. With regards to you, your friend C.M. Russell. And this letter was to a friend of Charlie's named Percy Rabin, who was, he aspired to be a children's book writer. And so Charlie tailored his letters to the people that he was sending them to, and he tailored this one, as you will see, you literature students in here. It says, Friend Percy, here I am in old London, and it sure is some antique. I was up north of the big camp the other day where stands an old monastery, also a wall built by the Romans, I suppose to protect them from Denny Doolan's forefathers, who crossed the channel once in a while in their bull boats, heeled with clubs of blackthorn and stone axes, to prove to the gladiators that life wasn't no lengthy picnic. I was told that this country was also the home of William the Conqueror, a gentleman who would make Sitting Bull look like a Catholic priest. I found a patch of woods that was really lonesome, and I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if the wheel of time would slip of cogs and slide back to the 10th century, like Mark Twain's Yankee. A fine chance I'd have stood in this timber afoot if Bill the Conqueror and his bunch of killers had rode up on me dressed in their steel Union suits. There'd have been nothing for me to do but take off my hat and sing God Save the King. Well, Percy, I will close as we are going out in the country. Best wishes from both of us to you and yours, C.M. Russell. This was 1914, and we all know what was going on in the world in 1914, and Charlie was very aware of what was going on in the world in 1914. As a matter of fact, Charlie made the last successful voyage back on the ship Lusitano before it was sunk. So we're real glad he made that trip. But this was a Christmas card he sent from England with a knight and a jester. And this was the poem he wrote with the card. It says, I drink not to king in castle strong with fighting men at call, who boasts behind his armored throng that lay within his wall, but fear to leave their drawbridge gates in numbers or alone. Without their blades and armored plates, they are but stingless drones. I drink to thee, a giggling clown, garments well befit. The smile is armor for the frown, no weapon but thy wit. Thou goest alone and weaponless where armed men fear to trod. For steel and blade are devil-made, but wit's a gift from God. Merry Christmas, C.M. Russell. And I might stop here, guys. We've reached the point here, and I can go on if you demand. But if you give me a standing ovation, I'll quit right now. Actually, this letter was to a friend of Charlie's, and they used to argue art a lot. And Charlie loved real pictures, what he called them, for regular men. That's how he described it. And he was really hard on modern art. And while he was in London and Paris, he sent this letter back. Friend Bill, we received your letter and was sure glad to hear from you. London is quite a sizable camp and has many things of interest. I took in a futurist show the other day that skinned anything I ever. One of the futurists led me around and explained, making it as clear as the London fog itself. Now this futurist was built like a wine bottle, very ladylike, and he wore a thin beard. I think to head off regular men that might make naughty eyes at him. He sprung off a string of talk that sounded like this, saying, Dynamism is the lyrical conception of forms interpreted by the infinite manifestation of the relations between absolute movement and relative movement, between ambiance and object, until it forms a whole ambiance and object. Then, he led me up to something in the frame that looked like an enlarged slice of spoiled summer sausage. And he said, this is not disintegration of simultaneousness, but dynamic dynamism. And it did look like that. We've been to Paris. We stayed 3 days. We saw 700 miles of pictures in about the same distance in restaurants, several churches, and Napoleon's tomb. Now old Nepo has been asleep a long time, but judging from the size of the stone over him and the guards around it, the French are taking no chances on him waking up. No doubt his people loved him, but think he's better off where he is, and it's a cinch everybody else does. Your friend C.M. Russell. And here's the last little bit from England. Pretty self-explanatory, but I want to point something out to you. You can obviously see who's on the horse. And, Sir Russell's entrance to the King's Court, okay? It says, "We sure got your letters, and sure we're glad to get them. We are one night out from merry old England, and now, although I'm glad I went, I did not shed many tears leaving the home of my ancestors. I found the Russells were pretty plentiful in this land. There's a great Russell Street, a Russell Square, a Hotel Russell, all kinds of Russells in England. I've been a little doubtful about my folks. I always had an idea that the Russell tree was a bit of a scrub. But the other day I was told that Sir Somebody Russell was led to the block and had the upper end of his backbone removed by the King's axeman. The man was busier in them days than Fred Piper's bouncer is at the Silver Dollar on a Saturday night. Now the loping off of Sir Russell's head makes it a cinch he was a noble man, as in those days the scrubs cashed in bed, which is a very undignified way of quitting. So Holland, if I happen to pass you on the street and you feel a chill like the ice wagon has gone by, don't blame me. It's the blood of the nobility I got in me." And I want you to notice the sigil on Charlie's banner. It's a buffalo skull. And here's Sir Russell's departure. "As near as I can make from history, if a man was a fighter and he count enough notches, he was benighted by the king, or beheaded. Either way, his pedigree was safe, and all those to whom he left his name, which was generally all he had to leave, were of noble blood. So now, Holland, if you can scare up a record like this, I will speak to you as an equal. Best wishes to you and yours, your friend C.M. Russell." Con Price was the guy that Charlie Russell cowboyed with in this decade of cowboying, and they owned a ranch together at one point. And then Con went to California, and he worked in Gilroy, California for what was then called the Miller and Lux Cattle Company, which was the biggest ranch ever in the United States. Went from Southern California clear to the Canadian line, not in one contiguous piece, but an incredibly huge place. It was put together by a man named Henry Miller. We don't know his real name. Henry Miller was the name of the ticket he bought. He was a German immigrant, and he used the name Henry Miller when he got to the United States because he had purchased Henry Miller's ship ticket to get to the United States. It says, "Dear friend Con, it's been some years since I laid on my belly in the shade of a wagon and built pictures, but I haven't forgotten, and I will always remember you were my agent, the first to boost my game and sell my work in Chinook. My memory often takes me back to the range and the camps we knew so well. There's not many of the old bunch left. Right now I know more dead men than live ones, and if you count back you'll probably find the same with you. 37 years I've lived in Montana, but I'm among strangers now. There's only two old-timers of our bunch around here, and that's Henry Keaton and Pete Van. Pete comes to town quite often. He's got some cows on the head of Geyser Creek. Time ain't improved his looks much. You know he never was very slender through the flanks, but now you could eat a sandwich in the time it takes to walk around the middle of it. He owned a bank in the town of Geyser, but he traded it off for an automobile and a white-faced bull. From what I hear of him as a chauffeur, I'd rather ride the bull. A friend of mine rode with Pete one time, and he said one was all he needed. Pete sits on his hat when he drives, and a friend of mine told me he rode with Pete once, and once was all he wanted. He said he lost his hat, and he would have lost his false teeth if he hadn't put them in his pocket. Henry Keaton still owns his ranch, but winters in town. His house is near ours, and we often meet and talk over old times. About 2 years ago, he leased his ranch to an honest prohibitionist farmer, and while Hank's in town shoveling coal in the furnace and sweeping off the front porch, Mr. Prohibit is busy moving Hank's ranch. He don't get the fence posts because they're frozen in, but everything that's loose, like stoves and harness and oats and tools, was his. He even rounded up the china nest eggs that Henry had to fool the hens with. All this goes to prove that an honest prohibitionist will take anything but a drink. Keaton says he had a hard time identifying his ranch because it looked like the day he filed the claim on it. And now when anybody speaks about the honest farmer, he gets plumb ringy. Well, kid, I guess Chinook ain't much like it was when I had my saloon there. My booze parlor didn't last long, 14 days, I think. It was like the life of a butterfly, short but very merry. I remember a stranger asked for a cocktail, and I built one. It should have been good. I put everything on the back bar in it, even that piece of lemon skin I'd been saving. I guess he wasn't a hard drinker. He took one swallow and he left the house and was never seen again. Now, kid, I want you to keep writing and tell me all you know about the old bunch, and maybe I'll come to Havre for the 4th of July and see you there. With regards to yourself and family and all friends, your friend, C.M. Russell. I'm going to quit right there, guys. And I didn't get through what I'd planned, and I apologize for the annoyances, but if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them. And I will answer this. Charlie died in 1926 at the age of 62. And he died pretty quickly. Much like Will Rogers, he was just a part of Americana history. And the cemetery where Charlie was buried was 2 miles from town, and the funeral procession that followed the horse-drawn hearse was still leaving town when the hearse arrived in the cemetery. And he was just so well thought of and so well respected. And I might finish just a little bit. I'll read you one more thing that Charlie wrote about himself, and I think it'll give you some insight. And then if you have a question, I'll be glad to answer it.
Man, you want me to scroll through the slides?
You know what? Why don't you go right down to the tail end there, Joel? In 1925, a year before Charlie died, he was asked to write something about himself. And this is an incredible piece of writing to me, and I want to say why. Charlie achieved a level of notoriety that few people achieved in that day unless it was a president. And he traveled the world, he'd been all over. He was well thought of in his hometown. In fact, the thing about Charlie was you can never find anybody who had a bad word to say about Charlie, and you can never find anyone who, once he was Charlie's friend, ever stopped being Charlie's friend. He was, I understand, one of the most congenial and wonderful men you could ever meet. And Will Rogers said about Charlie, he's the single best storyteller I've ever heard in my life. And when Charlie speaks, I keep my mouth shut. That's a man who was the unofficial ambassador to the world and made his living in after-dinner speaking engagements. Charlie wrote this about himself. He never said a word about his prowess as an artist. He wrote about what he thought had value in his life. This is what he said. The papers have been kind to me, many times more kind than true. Although I worked for many years on the range, I am not what people think of or think a cowboy should be. I was neither a great roper nor a great rider. I was a night wrangler. How good I was, I'll leave it for the people I worked for to say. There are still a few of them living. In the spring, I wrangled horses. In the fall, I night herded beef. I worked for the big outfits and always held my job. I had many friends among cowmen and cowpunchers. I've always been what is called a good mixer. I had friends when I had nothing. My friends were not always within the law, but then I haven't said how law-abiding I was. I haven't been too bad, nor too good to get along with. My life has never been very serious with me. I live to play, and I'm playing yet. Laughs and good judgment have saved me a many a black eye, but I don't laugh at others' tears. I was a wild young man, but age has made me gentle. I drank, but never alone, and when I drank, it sure was no secret. I'm still friendly with drinking men. My friends are mixed, preachers, priests, and sinners. I belong to no church, but I'm friendly and respect them all. I have always liked horses, and since I was 8 years old have owned a few. I'm old-fashioned and peculiar in my dress. I am eccentric. That is a friendly way of saying you're crazy. I believe in luck and have had lots of it. To have talent is no credit to its owner. For what man can't help, he should get neither credit nor blame. It's not his fault. I am an illustrator. There are lots better ones, and some worse. But any man that can make a living doing what he likes is lucky, and I'm sure of that. Anytime I cash in now, I win. Charlie Russell.